The galaxy buzzed with strange sounds and flashing lights. But in the small maintenance room aboard the Viroxian starship, all was quiet. The hum of machines and the soft shuffle of feet echoed off cold metallic walls. The janitor, a human man in a faded blue uniform, wiped his brow as he scrubbed a forgotten corner of the ship. But today, as the air seemed to still around him, something unexpected happened. A little alien girl, her skin glowing faintly in shades of lavender and pink, tugged at his sleeve. She had been silent for so long, an alien child once thought mute. But when her wide eyes met his, and she whispered a single word, the universe itself seemed to hold its breath. "Daddy." Before we dive deeper into this extraordinary story, let us know where you're watching from. If this heartwarming tale of unexpected connections resonates with you, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's episode will leave you speechless, with even more incredible moments unfolding. The starship's halls felt endless, the sharp metallic hum of machinery pressing in from all directions. The crew went about their business, each absorbed in their duties, their footsteps echoing in perfect unison. But to the janitor, the man who cleaned the forgotten corners of the Viroxian ship, it was all just white noise. His world was the quiet between the clangs, the spaces between commands. He wore his faded uniform like armor, his name tag, David, a simple testament to the life he once led before the galaxy called him here to scrub and sweep in shadows. David had grown used to the silence, especially the silence of her, the little girl with lavender skin, pale pink hair that shimmered under the sterile lights, and the softest, most haunted eyes he had ever seen. She'd been brought aboard months ago, a mystery even to the alien crew. Her parents, whoever they were, had never arrived with her. Instead, she had been placed in a special care unit, where she sat in stillness, staring at the walls as if waiting for something that never came. She had never spoken. Not a word, not a cry, just silence, like the hollow hum of the ship. David had been told she might never speak. The doctors said it was because of the trauma, the shock of being torn from her world. They said it might take years, if she ever spoke at all. The child had been labeled a mute, an anomaly, a case. They didn't know her, not really, but David did. He saw something in her eyes, a longing, a quiet strength, and he couldn't help but feel a protective pull toward her, a bond that grew stronger with each passing day. And so he cleaned. He wiped the tables, polished the floors, and in the quiet moments between his chores, he would sneak glances at her, sitting by the window. There was always an invisible barrier between them, but he would smile, trying to offer something of comfort, though he knew she couldn't hear it. It was on one of these days that she suddenly appeared before him. She had a toy bear clutched tightly in her small hands, her wide eyes focused on him with an intensity that felt unfamiliar. She didn't speak. Instead, she simply stood there, watching him as he worked. And then, softly, almost as if it were the most natural thing in the world, she whispered, "Daddy." David froze. The mop he had been holding slipped from his hands, clattering against the floor. He blinked, his heart pounding in his chest. Had he heard that right? She couldn't have. No one had ever heard her speak before. "Daddy," she repeated, a shy smile tugging at her lips as she held up the stuffed bear. Tears welled up in David's eyes as he knelt down to her, his hands trembling. Did you say that?" His voice was barely a whisper, afraid that if he spoke too loudly, the moment would shatter like glass. But she nodded slowly, her expression pure and open, as though nothing in the universe could be more simple than this word. And in that moment, everything changed. David sat on the edge of the metal bench, still stunned, trying to process what had just happened. The girl, his little alien daughter, had spoken, and not just any word, but the one word that carried so much weight. "Daddy." For a moment, everything seemed to freeze around him. The clattering machinery, the hum of the starship, the footsteps of the busy crew, all of it fell silent, replaced by the sound of his own heartbeat thudding in his ears. He looked at the little girl, her wide purple eyes fixed on him, waiting perhaps for a response. Did you say that to me?" he asked softly, his voice shaky, as if speaking too loudly would somehow make the moment vanish. The girl just nodded, her pink hair falling in soft waves around her face. The bear clutched tightly in her arms like a lifeline. David couldn't help but feel the overwhelming pull of responsibility. This child, this silent, mysterious alien girl, had somehow chosen him. He wasn't sure why, but in the simplicity of her gaze, he felt an unspoken connection, something more profound than words, something that transcended all the differences between them. He wasn't her father in the traditional sense, not in the way that the crew might expect, not in the way that the galaxy might understand. But in that moment, he felt it: the duty, the bond, the love. He swallowed hard, fighting the lump in his throat. His fingers brushed through his hair as he tried to gather his thoughts. The weight of what had just happened, what she had just said, pressed down on him. "What does this mean?" he whispered to himself. He had been a janitor, a man who cleaned up the messes others left behind, a man who had once had a family of his own before everything fell apart. Now, this alien child had somehow placed a label on him that he wasn't sure he was ready for. But there was something else, something deeper. She had chosen him. She had broken through the silence with a word so powerful, so simple, that it left him reeling. It wasn't just an alien child learning to speak, it was a call to him, a call for protection, for care, for something more than just a fleeting interaction in the sterile world of the starship. He glanced around the quiet maintenance room, the only space he truly felt at ease in, and then at her again. "What do I do now?" The girl smiled softly, her gaze never leaving his face. And in that moment, he realized she wasn't waiting for an answer from him. She was waiting for him to take the next step to be the father she had just named him, even if he didn't know how. And for the first time since everything had changed, David felt the stirrings of hope, faint but real. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't alone in this galaxy. The days that followed were a blur of unexpected moments. David couldn't stop replaying the word in his mind, Daddy. It was simple, but it held a weight that shook him. Every time he passed by the little girl's quarters, she would smile, her eyes watching him with a curiosity he hadn't seen before. Each time, it became harder to ignore the stirring in his chest, the quiet longing to be more than just a janitor. David stopped by her room more often, not because he had to, but because something inside him drew him there. Sometimes, he would talk to her as he cleaned nearby, but she never spoke again. She only listened, her small head tilted, absorbing every word he said. One evening, after finishing his rounds, David sat beside her in the dim glow of the ship's lights. The girl was sitting at a table, her hands busy with crayons, drawing on a scrap of paper. David watched her, captivated by the way her fingers worked the colors, creating patterns and shapes. "Who taught you to draw?" he asked, his voice low and curious. She didn't respond at first, but her fingers continued to move, tracing swirls and circles. Then, after a long pause, she spoke again. "You." David's heart stopped. He blinked in surprise. "I taught you to draw?" His voice faltered, caught between disbelief and something deeper. She nodded slowly, her eyes meeting his. In that moment, something shifted inside David. She had come to rely on him, to trust him in ways he hadn't expected. She had chosen him, in her own way. David leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "What else do you remember? What else do you need me to teach you?" The girl didn't answer with words. Instead, she picked up the crayon again and drew a simple line across the paper, a smooth, curving shape that seemed to connect everything. It wasn't a word, but it felt like one. A promise. David's chest tightened as he watched her draw a heart, unasked for, unspoken. He didn't know if she understood the meaning of the shape, but it felt like the universe was drawing them closer, a quiet bond growing between them. David gently placed his hand over hers, feeling the warmth of her small palm. "I'll be here," he whispered. "I'll teach you everything I know." And in that moment, David realized that in this vast, lonely galaxy, he wasn't alone anymore. The days after that night felt different. David couldn't stop thinking about the heart the girl had drawn for him. It wasn't much, just a simple shape on a piece of paper, but it was everything. It was the first piece of communication between them that wasn't rooted in silence. The first crack in the barrier that had existed between them. He found himself thinking about it more than he should have. What did it mean? Why had she drawn that particular shape? Was it a sign, a gift, or was it just a child's random doodle? David wasn't sure, But one thing was certain, something was shifting, something that felt like the beginning of a connection he hadn't known he needed. The next day, after finishing his rounds, David stopped by her room again. The girl was sitting in the same spot, her crayon box now scattered across the table. Her tiny fingers were still busy at work, but this time, there was more purpose in her movements. She wasn't just drawing aimlessly, there was intention behind it, something he hadn't seen before. He leaned against the doorframe, watching her for a moment, unsure if he should interrupt. But then, as if she sensed his presence, the girl looked up, her lavender eyes meeting his with a quiet intensity. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was comfortable, but there was something unspoken hanging between them. David smiled softly, stepping into the room. "What are you drawing today?" She didn't answer, but instead pushed the paper toward him. David blinked, surprised by the gesture. He took the paper in his hands, and his heart skipped a beat. The girl had drawn a map, at least. It looked like one. Curved lines, jagged shapes, and strange symbols he didn't recognize. It wasn't a map of the ship or any place he'd ever seen, but it was unmistakably a map of something. David turned the paper over, trying to make sense of it. He didn't understand the symbols, but one thing was clear: this was no accident. This was intentional. She was trying to tell him something. She was trying to reach him in a way that words couldn't. He looked at her again, meeting her gaze. "Is this a map? Of where?" She nodded slowly, her eyes wide, waiting for him to understand. David felt a surge of both fear and excitement. What was she trying to tell him? What was this map leading to? He tucked the paper gently into his pocket and smiled at her. "We'll figure it out," he said softly. And in that moment, David realized that his journey with this mysterious, silent child was just beginning. David couldn't shake the image of the map. The girl had drawn it with such care, as if each line was a message, each symbol a clue. He studied it that night, alone in his small quarters, turning the paper over in his hands, trying to understand what she had meant. The more he looked at it, the more it felt like a puzzle, a map to something hidden, something important. But what? The symbols were unlike anything he'd seen before. They didn't belong to any known language, not even the alien tongues spoken aboard the ship. Yet, somehow, they seemed familiar, like something that had been etched into his mind long ago but buried deep. The next day, David decided to take a step forward. He had no answers, but he couldn't ignore the feeling that this map was important. He made his way to the girl's quarters, his heart pounding in his chest. He had to know more. When he arrived, she was sitting by the window, staring out at the distant stars. Her back was to him, and for a moment, he simply watched her. The girl, so small and fragile in this vast, cold world, seemed to hold an inner strength that both frightened and fascinated him. She had spoken to him, and now she had drawn this map. What else was she trying to tell him? He knocked gently on the doorframe, not wanting to startle her. The girl turned, her eyes meeting his. There was something different in her gaze now, something more knowing. She had given him the map, and she knew he would follow it. He smiled, trying to hide the nervousness that threatened to bubble up inside him. "I need your help," David said quietly. "Can you show me where this map leads?" The girl didn't speak, but she stood up and walked toward him, her tiny hand reaching for his. She led him to the table where the map lay, her fingers tracing the lines with a precision that sent a shiver down his spine. She was guiding him, showing him a path he had never seen, a path that felt both impossible and necessary. David crouched down beside her, his hand resting gently on hers. "Let's find out together," he said, his voice steady, though his heart raced. The girl nodded, and for the first time since he had met her, David felt a surge of certainty. They were about to uncover something that would change everything. Whatever this map was, whatever it led to, he knew that he wouldn't be alone in this discovery. And for the first time in a long time, that thought filled him with hope. The corridors of the Viroxian starship were labyrinthine, their metal walls cold and unyielding. The hum of the ship's engines vibrated through the floors, a constant reminder of the vast emptiness outside. David had cleaned these halls countless times, but today they felt different. Today, they held a secret, a path to something unknown. The girl, his daughter now, In his heart, no matter what anyone else said, led the way, her small form moving swiftly ahead. She wasn't running. There was a quiet confidence in her steps, as if she knew exactly where they were going. David followed, glancing down at the map, then back at her. The lines and symbols she had drawn were starting to make sense. They weren't just random markings. They seemed to correspond to certain areas of the ship, places that were hidden even from the higher-ranking officers who walked these halls daily. As they moved through the ship, David's thoughts raced. What was this map leading to? What was she trying to tell him? Finally, after what felt like an eternity of winding through the dimly lit corridors, they arrived at a seemingly ordinary door. It was small, tucked away in a forgotten corner of the ship, almost as if it had been intentionally ignored. The kind of door no one ever noticed unless they were looking for something. David's breath caught in his throat. The girl stopped in front of the door and looked up at him, her expression unreadable. He reached for the handle, his fingers trembling, but he hesitated. Could he trust what the map had led them to? She tugged gently on his sleeve, and for the first time, he realized that she wasn't afraid. She trusted him completely. That gave him the courage to open the door. The room beyond was dark, its walls lined with metal shelves that seemed to hum with a strange energy. The air smelled musty, like something long forgotten. Dust hung in the corners, and the soft glow of distant starlight filtered through small vents, casting long shadows across the room. David stepped inside, his heart racing. "What is this place?" he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. The girl walked past him, moving toward the far wall. There, tucked away in a corner, was a strange device. It looked like an ancient artifact alien, yet somehow familiar. It was covered in symbols, the same ones the girl had drawn on the map. David's mind raced. This was it. This was what she had been leading him to. But what was it? And why had she chosen him to find it? He crouched beside her, his fingers brushing against the surface of the device. As his touch made contact, a soft pulse of light flickered to life, illuminating the room in a soft, eerie glow. The girl looked up at him, her eyes wide with expectation. This was the moment everything would change. David's fingers hovered over the glowing symbols on the device, each pulse of light matching the beat of his heart. The air in the room seemed to thicken, charged with a strange energy that he couldn't explain. It wasn't just the glow of the device, it was something more, something ancient and powerful. The girl stood beside him, watching with quiet intensity, her small hand reaching toward the device, but pulling back at the last moment. She seemed hesitant, as though unsure whether she should be the one to activate it or if that responsibility fell to him. David took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. The girl had trusted him with this. She had chosen him to uncover whatever secret lay within the heart of this forgotten room. It wasn't just about cleaning up the ship anymore. It was about something far greater. He touched the device, his hand landing gently on its smooth, cool surface. The moment his fingers made contact, the pulse of light grew brighter, illuminating the entire room. The walls seemed to shift, their shapes warping as if the very structure of the starship was being rewritten. The floor beneath him vibrated, a deep hum that resonated through his bones. The girl stepped back, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear. David glanced at her, then back at the device. "Is this what you've been leading me to?" he whispered, his voice tight with uncertainty. Her only response was a faint nod, her eyes never leaving the pulsing lights. David's heart pounded in his chest, but he couldn't pull away. Something deep inside him told him that this was the key. This was what had been hidden from the world, what had been hidden from him, and now he was the one who would unlock it. Suddenly, the device shifted. A low hum filled the room, followed by the sound of gears turning, metal scraping against metal. The air shimmered with an energy that seemed to bend reality itself. The walls of the room dissolved into a series of glowing lines, revealing a hidden passageway that had been concealed for who knew how long. David's breath caught in his throat. The map, the symbols, the girl, they had all led him here, to this moment. The passage before him was the next step, the next part of the journey. He could feel it. He could feel it in his bones. With a shaky exhale, David turned to the girl. "Are you ready?" he asked, though he wasn't sure if he was asking her or himself. The girl nodded, her expression calm, her hand reaching for his once more. Without a word, they stepped into the glowing passage, the hidden doorway sealing behind them with a soft hiss. They were no longer just cleaning the ship. They were uncovering the truth. Together, the passage was narrow, winding through the bowels of the ship like a forgotten artery, its walls lined with strange, pulsating lights that seemed to hum with life. The air was thick with dust, and the smell of old metal filled David's nose as he followed the girl down the narrow path. The further they went, the more the ship seemed to shift around them, as if it were waking up, reacting to their presence. David couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a hidden part of the ship, it was something more, something ancient. The girl led the way, her steps sure and steady, like she had walked this path 1,000 times. She had always known where they were going, even if he hadn't. They finally reached the end of the passage, where a massive door loomed in front of them, etched with the same symbols that had appeared on the device and the map. This wasn't just any door, it was an entry to something far beyond the scope of the ship, a gateway to a secret the galaxy had long forgotten. David stopped in front of it, his heart racing. The girl had stopped too, her small hand reaching for the door. She didn't hesitate. She didn't ask for permission, she knew what needed to be done. And for the first time since they'd started this journey together, David realized he wasn't leading. She was. He watched as she placed her hand on the door, and for a moment, nothing happened. The symbols on the door glowed faintly, but no sound, no movement came. Then, with a soft sigh, the girl whispered something under her breath, a word David couldn't understand, but felt deep in his chest. The door shuddered, then began to open, slowly at first, as if it were reluctant to reveal what lay beyond. David held his breath. Whatever was behind that door, whatever had been hidden away for so long, was about to be uncovered. The door finally parted fully, and what lay behind it was nothing like David expected. It wasn't a storage room or a control room, nor anything else he had seen in the sterile halls of the starship. Instead, it was an ancient chamber, its walls lined with crystal panels that glowed faintly, casting eerie light across the floor. At the center of the room was a pedestal, and on that pedestal sat a crystal, clear and untouched by time. David took a step forward, but the girl tugged gently at his sleeve, her eyes wide with a mixture of wonder and apprehension. He crouched beside her, looking at the crystal, knowing that whatever it was, it had been waiting for them to find it. "Is this it?" David asked softly, more to himself than anyone. The girl nodded, her fingers tightening around his hand. This was the truth. The secret hidden in the heart of the ship, the reason she had spoken to him, the reason they were here. David reached out slowly, his fingers brushing against the smooth surface of the crystal. The moment he touched it, a wave of energy pulsed through him, a shock that made his bones hum. The chamber around them seemed to vibrate, and for a brief moment, David thought he could hear voices, whispers, ancient and foreign, but full of power. It was then that he realized the gravity of what they had uncovered. This wasn't just an artifact. This was the key to something much larger, something that could change everything. The galaxy, he realized, had been waiting for them to find it. And now that they had, there was no turning back. David stood frozen, his hand still resting lightly on the crystal, feeling the hum of energy radiating from it. The air around them seemed to bend and warp, as if the room itself was alive, aware of their presence. He couldn't shake the feeling that this moment, this discovery, had been preordained, that it was all meant to happen this way. The girl beside him, her small hand gripping his tightly, watched the crystal with a gaze that seemed to pierce through time itself. She knew something he didn't. She had always known. Slowly, David withdrew his hand, though the hum of energy didn't cease. The crystal seemed to be calling to him, its glow pulsing with a steady rhythm, as if it was waiting for something. Waiting for him to do what? To unlock it? To understand what it held? He glanced down at the girl. Her eyes were still locked on the crystal, but she said nothing. There was no fear in her gaze, only a quiet understanding that this was the next step. "Is this your memory?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He didn't know why he said it, but it felt right. He couldn't explain it, but it felt as though the girl had been connected to this crystal for as long as she could remember. She nodded slowly, her fingers brushing the surface of the pedestal as if comforting it, as if she, too, were waiting for the moment to unfold. David's heart tightened. The room grew colder as a low hum filled the air. Suddenly, the crystal's surface began to shift, its glow intensifying, rippling with colors that seemed to move like liquid light. The symbols that had been etched into the walls flickered, coming to life, aligning with the rhythm of the crystal's pulse. David stepped back instinctively, but the girl didn't move. She stood tall, her eyes locked on the glowing crystal, as if it had become a part of her, like a missing piece of her own existence. She had been waiting for this moment too. A deep, resonant voice echoed through the chamber, not from any speaker or device, but from the crystal itself. It was alien, incomprehensible, but full of power. The voice seemed to resonate with something inside David, something primal, something buried deep. The girl's eyes widened as she stepped forward, her fingers brushing the air just above the crystal. She whispered a single word, one that David couldn't understand, but it felt like a command. The crystal's glow shifted once more, and this time David felt it. The room seemed to breathe around him, the walls seemed to stretch and shrink, and suddenly an image appeared before him, projected by the crystal's light, a scene from a distant past. It was a battlefield, alien and familiar at the same time. Strange ships burned in the sky, and towering figures stood against a backdrop of swirling chaos. David watched in awe as the scene played out, as if the crystal were unlocking the memories of the past. He turned to the girl, his voice low with disbelief. "What is this?" Her gaze never left the vision, her face pale but steady. "The truth," she whispered, "the truth of who I am." In that moment, David understood. This crystal wasn't just a relic, it was a memory, a doorway to the past. And the girl, his daughter, was the key to unlocking it all. The vision from the crystal faded, leaving David with a sense of awe and a weight he wasn't sure he could carry. The battlefield, the ships, the towering figures, it all felt like a distant dream, one that connected him to a time he could never truly understand. Yet, there was something deeply familiar about it, something that resonated with him on a level he couldn't explain. He turned back to the girl, who stood silently beside him, her eyes still locked on the crystal. The soft glow illuminated her face, making her look almost ethereal, like she was a part of something much larger than this moment. In her gaze, David saw the weight of centuries of memories, of histories long forgotten, of legacies lost to time. "We have to go," he said softly, the gravity of what they had uncovered sinking in. "There's nothing left for us here." The ship, the crew, the sterile world they had known, it all seemed so far away now. There was no place for them in that world anymore. They were no longer just a janitor and his silent alien daughter. They were part of something much bigger, something that transcended the confines of the starship. The girl didn't speak, but she nodded, as if she understood everything that was about to happen. She reached up and took David's hand, her touch warm and reassuring. In that moment, he realized that whatever came next, they would face it together. David took a deep breath and stepped back from the pedestal, pulling the girl gently along with him. As they turned to leave, the crystal's glow dimmed, and the room seemed to close in around them. But something had shifted. Something had been set into motion that couldn't be undone. As they walked through the passageway, David's mind raced with questions. What had the vision meant? Why had the crystal shown him that battlefield, those figures? And what was the girl's true connection to it all? But for now, the answers didn't matter. They had discovered the truth, and that was enough. He paused at the entrance, looking back one last time at the room they had just left. The map, the journey, the connection, it had all led them here. And now, as they walked forward, David knew that there would be no going back to the life he had once known. He was no longer just the janitor. He was her father, her protector, and whatever their future held, they would face it together. The stars outside the ship gleamed brightly, as if beckoning them to move forward into the unknown. And for the first time, David felt that maybe, just maybe, the universe wasn't as vast and empty as it had once seemed. With the girl's small hand in his, he stepped into the future, ready for whatever came next.